Ancient Greek and Roman cultures. Comparing the ancient Greek culture and the ancient Roman culture. Beginning in the 8th century BC, ancient Rome grew from a small town on central Italy's Tiber River into an empire that, at its peak, encompassed most of continental Europe, Britain, much of Western Asia, northern Africa, and the Mediterranean islands. Among the many legacies of Roman dominance are the widespread use of the Romance languages. Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian derived from Latin, the modern Western alphabet and calendar, and the emergence of Christianity as a major world religion. Greece, on the other hand, is located at the southeast end of Europe, and it is the southernmost country of the Balkan Peninsula. Greece is referred to as a southern European country because geographically she is part of this region. It occupies the peninsula that lies between the Mediterranean and Aegean seas. Surrounded by hills and mountains, the cities of ancient Greece nestled in the valleys of that land. Ancient Greece was broken into many small regions, the people of each speaking their own dialect and having their own way of life. With a limited amount of arable land, the Greeks focused on building ships and were well known for their magnificent pottery. The ancient Greeks and Romans both began their histories as city-states. While the irregular coastline and the mountainous terrain of the Greek peninsula isolated the various Greek city-states from one another, the city of Rome was located in the geographical middle of a generally north-south plain, bordered on the east with mountains and on the west by the sea. Therefore, Rome was exposed to the migrations and invasions of people from the Po River in the north and Sicily in the south. The two primary ethnic and cultural influences upon the Romans were determined in large parts by its geography. That is, the first influence was that of the Etruscans in the north, and the second major influence was that of the Greeks coming up from the south. The influence of the Etruscans from the north had on the Roman culture was their artistic styles, religious practices and gods, clothing and blood sports. Greeks highly influenced Roman culture through religion, poetry, art, architecture, and social customs. By the time the city-state of Rome had emerged as a distinct entity out of its Etruscan origins and was prepared to expand its own unique influence, Greek civilization had spread through the Mediterranean basin. However, the fierce exclusiveness of the Greek city-states from one another, stemming from their geographical isolation, had determined that Greek colonization of the Mediterranean would be an extension of isolated city-states. The Greek polis did not permit the building of a Greek empire, and the strict barriers to the extension of citizenship prevented any city-state from becoming dominant over the others. The Romans, on the other hand, brought other communities on the Italian peninsula under their control, first by conquest and then by extending Roman citizenship to elements of the conquered peoples. There are, therefore, two key components in the success of the Romans in building an empire. One surely was their military powers, and the other was their organizational, political, and legal skills in extending their governance over the conquered peoples into the empire. Macedonian and Roman invasion of Greece. The Greek city-states had to be united by force, first through the invasion of Macedonians and then by the Romans. But the Greeks would, in a sense, have the last laugh. Their culture was more sophisticated, their learning and philosophy more advanced, and Roman culture would be overwhelmed as the Romans absorbed their cultural influences of the Hellenistic East. In the final outcome, as the Roman Empire declined in the West, Roman emperors transferred their capital from Italy to Asia Minor. Long after The Roman Empire was gone. The Byzantine Empire, an amalgam of Roman and Greek culture, centered in the city of Constantinople, would endure. The Greeks had conquered their conquerors. Art. Greek art is considered superior to the merely imitative or decorative Roman art. Indeed, much of the art that we think of as Roman is actually a copy of a Greek original. The goal of the classical Greek sculptors was to produce an ideal artistic form, where the goal of Roman artists was to produce realistic portraits, often for decoration. This is obvious oversimplification, of course. Most Greek art adorned utilitarian objects, just as Roman art adorned the living spaces. Greek pottery, among other forms, was a popular import in Italy. Greek art is divided into the Mycenaean, Geometric, Archaic, and Hellenistic periods, in addition to its great success in the Classical period. During the Hellenistic period, there was demand for copies of earlier art, and so it too can be described as imitative. Economy: Greece versus Rome. The economy of ancient cultures, including both Rome and Greece, were based on agriculture. Greeks ideally lived on small cells sufficient with producing farms, but bad agricultural practices made many households incapable of feeding themselves. Big estates took over, producing wine and olive oil, which were also the chief exports for the Romans. Farming in ancient Greece was difficult to the limited amount of good soil and crop land. It is estimated that only 20% of the land was usable for growing crops. The main crops were barley, grapes, and olives. Barley was the main cereal crop for the ancient Greek farmers. One of the crops that they were able to grow in less than fertile soils, aside from grapes and olives, was the fig tree. This was a crop that could withstand the extreme conditions and dryness and drought, partly explaining why it was such an important part of Greek agriculture. The Romans, on the other hand, were able to import most of their wheat by taking over provinces that could provide them with this all-important source of food. They had their own farmland in addition to engaging in trade with other countries. Within urban life, manufacturing was much more common. Greece and Rome worked mines, while Greece also had slaves. The economy of Rome was dependent on slave labor from the expansion until the late Empire. Social classes of Greece and Rome. The social classes of Greece and Rome changed over time, but the basic divisions consisted of freedmen, slaves, foreigners, and women. Only some of these were counted as citizens. Greece had metics, which were foreign residents with no citizen rights, citizens which were members of the political society at large, and women who did not have the right to vote. Rome, in contrast, had plebeians, who were members of the lower social classes, and patricians, who were aristocrats and noblemen. They were similar, but both had slaves, freedmen, meaning those that were once slaves, and a considerable amount of wealth. Greek, at least Athenian, women were not citizens. Roman women were, but both societies were also divided according to wealth. Family. Most Greeks, like most other people throughout history, lived in families with a mother, a father, and their children. Usually men got married when they were about 25 or 30 years old, but women got married much younger, between 12 and 16 years old. Girls from rich families got married a bit younger than those from poor families, because the girls were so young they did not have much choice about who they were going to marry. Their fathers or uncles or brothers chose for them. But many people married their first or second cousins, who they had known their whole lives. Divorce was pretty common in ancient Greece. If you got divorced, the man had to return the woman's dowry so she could have some money to live on. The children stayed with their father, learning to run the farm or business they would inherit. The basic units of Roman society were households and families. Households included the head, usually the father of the household, his wife, children, and other relatives. In the upper classes, slaves and servants were also part of the household. The head of the household had great power over those living with him. Not much affection was allowed to be shown to the children. Groups of related households formed into a family. Families were based on blood ties or adoption, but were also political and economic alliances. While upper class girls married very young, there is evidence that lower class women often married in their late teens or early 20s. Government. Originally, kings ruled Greece, then an oligarchy ruled by the few, and then democracy, voting by the citizens. City-states joined together to form leagues that came into conflict, weakening Greece and leading to its conquest by the Macedonian kings and later the Roman Empire. Kings also originally governed Rome. Then Rome, observing what was happening elsewhere in the world, eliminated them. It established a mixed republican form of government, combining elements of democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy. At one point, it shifted to being ruled by a leader, but in a slightly different form than the past, in which the new leader was constitutionally sanctioned and given the title of Roman Emperor. Over time, though, the Roman Empire split apart and the western parts eventually reversed back to small kingdoms. Religion. The Greek and Roman gods worshipped by the two nations had similar roles and duties. However, their names were different. The Roman religion was more practical and less poetical than the Greek religion. Every Roman god had something to do. Several divinities presided over the birth and nursing of an infant, and then were worshipped accordingly for the benefits which they were supposed to bestow. There were more superstitious rites practiced by the Romans than by the Greeks. Great attention was given to dreams and rites of divination. Hypothesize the causes and reasons for the differences and similarities between Rome and Greece. I feel that the reasons why they are different are: Rome is directly connected to the mainland, whereas Greece is largely a collection of islands. Rome is designed in a way that will allow for large crops, whereas the land in Greece is less fertile, forcing them to maintain smaller crops in general. When it comes to art, Greek art was way superior to Roman art. Romans used copies from the Greeks and made them theirs. Greeks had more divisions of social classes than Romans. Women were not considered to be citizens in ancient Greece, but they were citizens in Rome. In Greece, the oldest son was the legal successor of the father, but in Rome, the father was the head of the family, even though the sons had their own families already. I feel that the reasons why they're similar are: Rome and Greece used agriculture and farming as a way of living. Both Rome and Greece have mountains and hills. They are also located in the Mediterranean Sea. Both Greece and Rome loved paintings and sculptures. Both Rome and Greece have made great contributions to our society when it comes to art, government, and architecture. What did the ancient Greeks and Romans do for us that directly impacted our modern society? The ancient Greeks gave many positive firsts to our modern society. Medicine. Hippocrates busted the myth by holding experiments that proved diseases were the reaction of the body to germs. He is often referred to as the father of medicine, the alarm clock. It had its origin in ancient Greece. They were mechanical and quite basic. The ancient Greeks used water clocks which would sound off delicate water organs or made pebbles drop against drums. Citizenship. Ancient Athenians shaped the concept of citizenship. To be a citizen, a man had to be born to Athenian parents, complete military service, and take part in jury service. From the citizens, the government representatives were chosen. Olympic Games. It is believed that the Greeks organized a festival at Olympia to honor god Zeus. Athletes from across the globe used to participate in a number of competitions, including discus and javelin throw. The ancient Romans also gave positive first to our modern society. Roads. In Britain, there were no roads prior to arrival of the Romans, who created a network straight, solid highways built on foundations of clay, chalk, and gravel with larger flat stones laid on top. These roads were slightly raised in the middle, sloping down to either side so that rain and surface water would drain off into ditches to either side. Concrete. Roman concrete was made from quicklime, pozzolana, and aggregate of pumice. Its widespread use in many Roman structures was a key part of what is known as the Roman architectural revolution. The calendar. The Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar in 46 BC, was a reform of the Roman calendar, taking effect shortly after the Roman conquest of Egypt. The Julian calendar split the year for the first time into 365 days divided into 12 months, with a leap day added to February every 4 years. What are the negative contributions of ancient Greece and Rome in our modern society? Ancient Greece also contributed to our modern society in a negative way. For example, even though women in our society have the right to express, succeed, vote, among others, a man's voice and opinion has more weight over the voice of a woman. Congress has more male than female members. Women will always be the minority. Ancient Rome also contributed our modern society in a negative way. For example, slavery. Believe it or not, there are still some employers that treat their employees as slaves. Those employers want the individual to work more hours than expected and with an unfair salary. The fact that rich people are becoming richer and poor people are becoming poorer, it's another negative contribution of ancient Rome in our society. Thank you for your attention.